The greatest show on earth and probably the most consequential was in Milwaukee today. It was the Republican National Convention, of course. And before we get into the politics, let me show you something from the opening prayers.
O Lord our God, we pray for the peace of Jerusalem, your eternal city, and for all the children of Abraham. We remember and pray for freedom for the hostages kidnapped and held so cruelly against their will. Lord, please keep them in your sight and hasten the day of their freedom.
Yeah, the hostages, the Israeli hostages, I remember them here every night. They're held by Hamas, forgotten, even abandoned by the political left and the international community. So it was terrific to see the Republicans putting these innocent victims front and centre. But on to the main event. And just 2 days after a would-be assassin shot Donald Trump, killing a supporter and injuring others, the former president, with his ear bandaged, returned to the public gaze. Trump didn't speak at the convention, that'll come later, but it was a triumphant return, as you saw. What's clear is the Republicans are now completely united behind their candidate. The Trump skeptics have either fallen away or been converted. And one convert is J.D. Vance, the inexperienced Ohio senator who Trump has announced as his vice presidential running mate. Vance quickly turned his strident criticism of Trump 8 years ago into a positive message.
I don't hide from that. I was certainly skeptical of Donald Trump in 2016, but President Trump was a great president, and he changed my mind. I think he changed the minds of a lot of Americans because, again, he delivered that peace and prosperity. If you go back to what I thought in 2016, another thing that was going on, Sean, is I bought into the media's lies and distortions. I bought into this idea that somehow he was going to be so different, a terrible threat to democracy. It was a joke. Joe Biden is the one who's trying to throw his political opposition in jail. Joe Biden is the one who's trying to undermine American law and order. President Trump did a really good job. And I actually think it's a good thing when you see somebody, you were wrong about him, you ought to admit the mistake and admit that you were wrong.
Yeah, as I keep saying, the hateful rhetoric from the left has to be called out. They consistently demonise Trump. I told you last night about that bullseye comment from Joe Biden. Now he's tried to explain it.
Let's talk about the conversation this has started, and it's really about language, what we say out loud and the consequences of those. You called your opponent an existential threat on a call a week ago. You said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. There's some dispute about the context, but I think you appreciate that.
I didn't say crosshairs. I was talking about focus on. Look, the truth of the matter was, what I guess I was talking about at the time was there was very little focus on Trump's agenda.
Yeah, the term is bullseye.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing.
What on earth is Biden trying to say? That bullseye is bad, but crosshairs would have been worse? Some lame excuse about wanting to put the focus on Trump? Well, there's an easy way to say that. You just say, put the focus on Trump. You don't need to call for a bullseye. Now, I've never been all in on Trump, as you know, but I was very supportive of the strength and the success of his foreign policy as president. He made the world a safer place, and we are less safe now. And I've always called out the unhinged attacks on Trump from leftist politicians and most of the media. They've been hysterical and they've been deceitful. And it's never too late to fight back, as Donald Trump Jr. did today.
What is that change going to look like, Don? What practically, your father as president, I think you would even say, was a divisive figure. What's it going to look like in the second term?
I don't think he was a divisive figure at all. I think the media created divisiveness around him. They lied about Russia collusion. They said he was a traitor. They went after him in every which way possible. If the media actually starts being an honest broker, talking about the things that he did, the prosperity he brought, the peace deals that he signed around the world, rather than the disaster that we're living right now, I think you'd do everyone in the country a big favor.
Yeah, the whole tiresome narrative from the media for more than 8 years now has been that Trump is evil, and they twist anything and everything to try to prove that point. President Biden even reminded us of one recent example.
How do you talk about the threat to democracy, which is real, when a president says things like he says? Do you just not say anything because it may incite somebody? Look, I have not engaged in that rhetoric. Now, my opponent is engaged in that rhetoric. He talks about there'll be a bloodbath if he loses.
He's still going on with this hysterical threat to democracy line. But what about this talk of a bloodbath if Trump loses? That's deliberately misleading and recklessly inflammatory. I dealt with this back in March. Remember, here's what the US media told people then.
Former President Trump's campaign now on the defensive after his fiery rhetoric at a rally in Dayton, Ohio on Saturday night. Trump warning while discussing the economy that there would be a, quote, bloodbath if he is not reelected in November. This after the former president kicked off the event by paying tribute to those who attacked the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. President Biden's campaign swiftly denouncing those comments as threats of political violence.
What I heard was a continuation of the same rhetoric, the same endorsement of political violence that we've seen from Donald Trump for years, as you pointed out. It goes even farther back, right?
Really? They're talking about threats of physical violence, political violence? Listen to them. And then listen to what Trump actually said. He was talking about an economic bloodbath.
We're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars.
They twisted that comment about the automotive industry to threats of political violence. How sick. And if you think there's something ugly about just using the word bloodbath, well, there's no shortage of the examples of the same media, of course, using that same term in their own political commentary.
But as Politico.com reports tonight on the, quote, bloodbath at the RNC.
Headlines calling it a, quote, bloodbath.
Be a bloodbath. Not only is it going to be a bloodbath, but after they leave New Hampshire, it's a bloodbath on her home turf. That's really tough. Trump has left a lot of corpses in his wake. I mean, we can count the bodies
as part of the, quote, MAGA drive to take over Maricopa County. And the headline refers to it as an impending bloodbath.
So there you have it. It's a classic case of the fake news, the fake hysteria and the demonisation of Trump by the left. And Joe Biden is still doing it, still using this discredited example. The hatred, of course, only begets more hatred. You just have to listen to these American comedians, including Jack Black, on stage in Sydney on Sunday night.
Don't miss Trump next time.
Yeah, barracking for a political assassination as a joke. It's abhorrent. Their concert tonight in Newcastle has just been cancelled. Maybe people are waking up to this stuff. It's been going on for nearly a decade, of course. Yet in last night's interview here with former Foreign Minister Bob Carr, try as I might repeatedly, I could not get him to concede that the Democrats, that the left, have gone too far for too long with the vitriol they throw at Donald Trump. You're saying the excuse for this polarisation and violent rhetoric from Democrats and their supporters is Trump, because he's a rogue.
Absolutely.
They have to escalate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think if you look at the record, Chris, you've got to say Trump has degraded the public debate.
Remember when the Democrats said, when they go low, we'll go high? Sure. It was a waste of time talking to Bob Carr. Whatever happened to respectful disagreement in politics? Carr had nothing to say except to slam Trump. He wouldn't criticise the Democrats for their own demonisation of Trump, their own contribution to the problem. See, this is the trouble for the Democrats and their supporters around the world. They've got nothing to say except to demonise Trump. Instead of trying to beat him in a normal political debate, they've lied about Russian collusion, they've lied about his own words, they've tried to bankrupt him, they've tried to have him struck off the ballot, and they've pursued him through the courts to try and imprison him. They've deliberately and deceptively helped to make politics as polarised and toxic as possible, and then they've tried to blame all of that on him as well. And now they might be starting to realise that their abuse might be the wind beneath his wings.